We began with the section which deals with Savitri's yoga, and I pointed out in what sense, just as Ashwapati's yoga represents Sri Aurobindo's own quest, his own tapasya, and its fulfillment, Savitri's yoga, in the same sense, relates to the mother's yoga. And I try to emphasize that these statements should not be taken very literally. Savitri is not a Puranic Harikatha, so we should not try to read into these things that people like me talk about very literal meanings. As I said yesterday, Ashwapati was a king, Sri Aurobindo was not a king. But he is using the Mahabharata legend, and since he is using the legend, he cannot twist or change the legend as he likes, so he has to stick to that legend. In fact, this is something which all great writers have done, whether it is Western writers or Eastern writers. They have always taken myths that are very basic to their culture and have tried to reinterpret these myths, because myths are valuable to a culture because they basically talk about the deepest aspirations of that culture. And Savitri myth is the representative of the deepest aspiration of our culture, which is represented by the Upanishadic prayer, Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor mam amritam gamaya. This quest for immortality, this quest for a status of consciousness which knows no shadow, this quest of consciousness where truth doesn't cast any shadow, is something very basic to our culture. And this was expressed in the Vedas by the Savitri myth. But when a Vedic myth comes back again in the Puranas, Puranas are meant to appeal to the common average person's understanding, his imagination, and therefore they take flesh and blood. And in many cases, the original inspiration is brought down. So Savitri, which I said was a Vedic myth symbolizing man's quest for immortality, became in the Puranas a story lauding, praising a wife's conjugal fidelity to her husband. Notice, Savitri is remembered for this rather than for the original inspiration behind the Vedic myth, which is the quest for immortality. And so this is how from the Vedas we come to the Puranas, and Sri Aurobindo is truer to the Vedic spirit rather than to the Puranic spirit. So what Sri Aurobindo says must be read in the Vedic light. In many ways, Sri Aurobindo is the only Vedic Rishi that we have known in modern times. And our mentality is so far away from the Vedic mentality that we repeatedly misunderstand the Vedas. And the Vedas were misunderstood not only by us, they were misunderstood by Max Muller and company, they were misunderstood by many generations of Indians. I don't want to go into it, but this spiritual perception, spiritual meaning of the myth and so on, are something which we should not lose sight of when we talk about Savitri. And therefore when we talk about who Savitri is, and I say Savitri quintessentially is the mother in the ashram, you should not try to read too much into it and say mother was French, Savitri was not French, how can it be true? These things should not come in. What I am talking about is the inner veracity, the truth of their aspiration, the truth of their quest. Now, as I was saying yesterday, it would take another set of lectures if I were to compare Ashwapati's yoga with Savitri's yoga, because in many ways they are different, yet the central inspiration, aspiration, quest is the same in both these cases. But as I said, the mother's focus was on bringing down the new path, whereas in Ashwapati's case, the focus was on locating the new path, on trying to find out, as I say, that why is it human life is so full of suffering and misery, in spite of all the science and technology that we have, in spite of all the spiritual wisdom that we have, why is it we don't seem to be making any progress? As I said, Sri Aurobindo was not happy with the religious solution which said progress is not possible on this earth, progress is only possible on some other shore which is beyond death. This, he said, is not acceptable to him, and he is therefore pursued consistently. This single aim: is there something that will make man's age-old dream of finding perfection on earth possible? As I said, this took him 40 to 50 years, and then he said, yes, there is this new power that is waiting to descend, and that is the purpose, meaning of this evolutionary journey. Now, the mother's purpose is not once again to repeat this sadhana. The mother's purpose is to bring it down and make it possessed by the human body. Make the human body ready as an adhara for receiving this new power. That was what mother was trying to do, and that in some sense is reflected in Savitri's yoga. Now, it will be difficult, as I said, to go into all the details of Savitri's yoga. It's a very, very long passage. There are about 100 pages of this. What I'll try to do, I will just concentrate on one canto, as I said yesterday, which is Canto 4, where she talks about the triple soul forces. As Savitri continues her inward journey, she meets three forces of the soul. Now, this again is a Vedic concept, forces of the soul. What are these forces of the soul? Veda has always talked about praying to the gods so that the gods descend into human beings. Now, there is a difference between God and gods. When we say God, we say the supreme reality. By gods, we mean in organizing this whole creation, the supreme reality has appointed some of his representatives, and they are called gods. And Sri Aurobindo very often uses the word gods with a small g and not a capital G. There is this kind of a distinction that he makes. Now, in the Vedas, very often you find that all the Vedic rishis pray to the gods to descend into themselves. Now, Vedas are all talk about yajnas, as Sri Aurobindo points out. Yajna is not just a ritual. Yajna basically is a spiritual transaction. What you are saying through a yajna is to the lords, O Lord, let all the animal propensities in me be vacated from my being, and the space they have created is meant for your descent. Let Varuna descend into me, let Indra descend into me, let Maitra descend into me. These are all, as Sri Aurobindo points out in the book on the Vedas, they are all names for various psychological properties. Now, Varuna stands for universality, So, when you pray to Varuna, you are only praying that universality, your consciousness should be so universal. So, when you talk about Indra and ask for Indra to descend into you, it's a Vedic way of talking about an illumined mind, a mind which has been cleared of all illusions and ignorance. Let that mind descend into me. This is what people were talking about. But Vedas, as you know, were written at the beginning of our civilization, when language had not split into two parts as it has now, which is the language of the head and language of the heart. They both came together in the Vedic times, and we have lost that faculty. Our language has now become far too intellectual, and therefore we don't see the Vedic meaning. Very strangely enough, Western scholars have also talked about the same thing, and they have said the Greek philosophers who came before Plato had the same mentality, had the same way of putting across things which the Vedic rishis had. But the West has no understanding of these things. West cannot even understand them, and the West has relegated them, and they are not even studied today. But the mentality is the same. So, when you talk about triple soul forces, these are the soul forces that the Vedic rishis had always prayed for, and these forces have come down, many of them have come down, and they have now become a part of human consciousness. But there is something very interesting, that whenever something very great comes from above, in the earth consciousness, in the consciousness of man, these forces, these powers very often gets perverted. The story when in the Puranas, gods and asuras were doing this Amrut Manthan, when the Amrut came first, who do you think got possession of it? Not gods. The asuras got possession of it first. And the Supreme Lord had to use a stratagem to wrest it from the hands of the asuras. So whenever a great force comes now, the asuras are very active. They know the value of it. Gods don't. You see, gods are not as smart as the asuras. Asuras first get hold of it. And they try to appropriate to themselves. So this has happened all the time. Take, for example, science. Science is, to my mind, undoubtedly a great power that comes down from the very highest heavens. But who is using this? Are we making godly use of it, or are we making asuric use of it? Anything that comes down, religion, science, technology, everything, the same thing also happened to other forces. So when Savitri is going into herself, at one point she is met by triple soul forces. She is met by three Madonnas, three women goddesses, and each one of them comes forward and says, Savitri, well, you don't have to you don't have to waste any more time. I am your soul. And she says, I am your soul, I have done this, I have done this. And these represent three powers which are already a part of the human consciousness. And that is why a civilization that has become possible, some kind of reasonable living has been possible on earth, because these three powers of the soul have already descended. But not only have they descended, they have also been perverted by the asuric forces. And you see here a beautiful description as Savitri proceeds. First of all, the first goddess comes. She is described as a goddess of universal compassion. This is on page 203. He says, middle of page 503, middle of that page. Accepting the universe as her body of woe, the mother of the seven sorrows bore the seven stabs that pierced her bleeding heart. The beauty of sadness lingered on her face. Her eyes were dim with the ancient stain of tears. Her heart was riven with the world's agony, and burdened with the sorrow and struggle in time. An anguished music trailed in her rapt voice, absorbed in a deep compassion's ecstasy, lifting the mild ray of her patient gaze. In soft, sweet, training words, slowly she spoke. This is the mother of sorrows. This is the mother of universal compassion. And she says, O Savitri, I am thy secret soul. To share the suffering of the world I came. I draw my children's pangs into my breast. I am the nurse of the dolour beneath the stars. I am the soul of all who wailing writhe under the ruthless harrow of the gods. If human beings are capable of showing compassion to other human beings, if, for example, an ordinary human being becomes almost a goddess when she becomes the mother, see, for me, every mother instantly is transformed into a goddess. Otherwise, human beings are so selfish. What is it that gives the mother this capacity? An ordinary woman, not a woman of great extraordinary virtue, extraordinary tapas, an ordinary woman. The minute she becomes a mother, instantly she is willing to give up everything she has and she is for her child. She spends sleepless nights never worrying what will happen. Won't I get aged very prematurely? Won't I have wrinkles on my face? She is not asking any of these questions. What is it? What happens to her concern about her figure and her face and her beauty and so on? Instantly she almost becomes a goddess. A mother to me, in her role as a mother, is a goddess. There may be other aspects to her. She is also a human being. She is also a human being. She is your neighbor. She is X, Y, Z, a number of things. But as mother, when a woman becomes a mother, she is this. She says, I have come down to earth and I have made it possible for human beings to show compassion to one another, love one another in various relationships. I am the soul of all who wailing writhe under the ruthless harrow of the gods. I am woman, nurse, and slave and beaten beast. And very often, when somebody brings you all this help, how do we treat them? We treat them as if they are beaten beasts. They are our slaves. I am woman, nurse and slave and beaten beast. I tend the hands that gave me cruel blows, the hearts that spurned my love and zeal I serve. I am the courted queen, the pampered doll. I am the giver of the bowl of rice. I am the worshipped angel of the house. I am in all that suffers and that cries. All the agony and suffering in the world, I make bearable. I make it bearable. Human beings can wait without losing faith in goodness. People wait for things to be better. And this capacity man has been given because I have come down to earth. I am in all that suffers and that cries. Mine is the prayer that climbs in vain from earth. I am traversed by my creatures' agonies. I am the spirit in a world of pain. The scream of tortured flesh and tortured hearts, fallen back on heart and flesh unheard by heaven, has rent with helpless grief and wrath my soul. I have seen the peasant burning in his hut. I have seen the slashed corpse of the slaughtered child, heard woman's cry ravished and stripped and hailed. Amid the bayings of the hellhound mob, I have looked on. I had no power to save. I have brought no arm of strength to aid or slay. God gave me love. He gave me not his force. You find that everywhere. People have love, people have compassion, but they don't have force. Where there is force, there is no love. So force and love don't seem to go together in this world. On the one side there is love. Where there is love, there is compassion, there is capacity to give. They don't have force. They don't have force to implement what they want to happen. And so this is a very beautiful thing. I just, here we have time, I sometimes think of myself as a kind of halwai. You come to your shop, there is such fabulous riches here. I say, look at this little bit. By the time I say this, I forget, there is that corner, I must show that, and this, that, and the other. This is what probably I will end up doing. Not the best thing is, we should all sit together and taste bit by bit each variety. This is not, there's no time for it. So you should read it yourself and see what this mother, this Madonna, is saying. This force has certainly come down to earth, and man is not an animal. Man is to some extent civilized. There is this tendency everywhere. But what has also happened, as soon as this Madonna, this representative of the soul, has finished what she has to say, Savitri suddenly, immediately hears after his voice, the voice of the perversion of this goddess. When the goddess comes, she also has been captured by the asuric forces, and she has also been captured by the ego. There is, take for example, communism. After all, what is at the heart of communism? What is at the heart of communism is compassion for the poor, compassion for the depressed and the tortured and the downtrodden. But look at the means they are using in many places. In South America, you will find some of the leaders of the communist movements have been priests from the Christian church. They said, we can't put up with this kind of injustice anymore. We know that as followers of Christ, we must stick to non-violence, love, but this has become too much. And when they rebel against this, they become leaders of communist movements which have initiated so much violence, sometimes meaningless violence. So this kind of compassion, this kind of thing, if it is not supported by a spiritual quality, moral anguish, if it is only moral, if it is not supported by a spiritual strength behind it, then it gradually, slowly perverts into a kind of hatred and anguish. And look at this. This is the asuric perversion of this divine force that has come, this divine Madonna which has come and occupied human heart, and he says this on page 505. She says the last word, the Madonna says, I know that one day he shall come at last. And there she stops. Then she ceased, and like an echo from below, answering her pathos of divine complaint, a voice of wrath took up the dire refrain, a growl of thunder or roar of angry beast, the beast that crouching growls within man's depths. Where is this beast? This beast is also in man's depths. And what does this beast say? Voice of a tortured titan, once a god. This is the voice of a titan. A titan is a Rakshasa, is an Asura. This is an Asuric voice, and this is a perversion of that goddess. What does he say? I am the man of sorrows. I am he who is nailed on the wide cross of the universe. To enjoy my agony, God built the earth. God built this, created this earth just to torture me and enjoy my agony. My passion he has made his drama's theme. He has sent me naked into his bitter world and beaten me with his rods of grief and pain, that I might cry and grovel at his feet and offer him worship with my blood and tears. God has on purpose put me into this condition so that I perpetually offer him my prayers. I am Prometheus under the vulture's beak, man the discoverer of the undying fire. In the flame he kindled, burning like a moth. I am the seeker who can never find. I am the fighter who can never win. I am the runner who never touched the goal. Hell tortures me with the edges of my thought. Heaven tortures me with the splendors of my dreams. What profit have I of my animal birth? What profit have I of my human soul? I toil like the animal die. I am man the rebel, man the helpless serf. Fate and my follows cheat me of my wage. I loosen with my blood my servitude's seal, and shake from my aching neck the oppressor's knees, only to see new tyrants on my back. My teachers lesson me in slavery. I am shown God's stamp and my own signature upon the sorry contract of my fate. I have loved, but none has loved me since my birth. My fruit of works is given to other hands. So there is always this complaint, this Asura is always complaining, God has been so unjust, God has been so unkind, and it goes on, in the middle of 507, I am the victim of titanic ills, I am the doer of demoniac deeds, I was made for evil, evil is my lot, evil I must be, and by evil live. There are people who reach this conclusion that there is so much injustice in this God's world that I don't care what I do as long as I get what I want to get. God himself doesn't seem to be playing his game by any rules. We are repeatedly being victimized. So we deny that there is any morality, there is anything good, bad. The only thing that matters is we must get what we want. Whoever comes in your way, just finish him off. This is the lesson. Very often, this is the spirit. Notice the great inspiration behind the communist movement, and very often the way in Russia, what happened to it. You go to Siberia, you can't put one foot anywhere in Siberia without stumbling across somebody's head or somebody's leaves, legs. How many people were sacrificed for what is called communism? no compassion, nothing at all. But they were kind of demonic zeal. We want to bring to earth this proletariat of the downtrodden. What did they bring? They were able to bring only the nightmare. The communist nightmare was all that. You never knew when you heard the midnight knock and how people were just lifted, and just from that day on they were not even heard of. All this came out of moral anguish, came out of the feeling that there has been injustice and we must set this injustice right. So it's quite possible, as you can see, the same motivation when it gets perverted, gets into an asuric form, these are the consequences. So everything that was inspired by noble ideals very often degenerates into an asuric creed. That is the tragedy of human consciousness. Why did Sri Aurobindo want the supramental consciousness? Is it because he just wanted to distinguish himself, coin a new word and establish himself as a votary of something new? Because he knew the greatness of human spirit. He knew what human spirit is capable of. He also knew what no one else knew, the utter inadequacy of the mental consciousness. And he warned us, if you don't try to get to a point where the new consciousness can be brought down, you will go on repeating age after age, millennium after millennium, the same old game. Oh, this time X went wrong, next time we'll set it right. So you set X right and suddenly find Y has gone wrong. Then you say, oh, X this time Y has gone wrong, we'll set Y wrong, correct, and next time the Z goes wrong. Something is bound to go wrong because this is the nature of the human consciousness. Human consciousness has a great capacity to pervert anything sacred that comes to it. And this has gone on happening. And still we have trust in human consciousness, still we have stress in our mental capacities, and still we think it is possible to bring down heaven with the human mind. Sri Aurobindo said this is not possible. This is not, because this is the tragedy that happens. Human consciousness can absorb the highest ideal and yet is capable of perverting it, putting it into, this is what I call a constant refusal of divine grace. Divine grace comes down to earth with every saint that has appeared on earth, whether it is in India or on the West. They bring to us God's light. Who wants God's light? Nobody wants God's light. He said, this is not what we want. Give us something else. This is what we keep saying. And the and the central purpose of Sri Aurobindo's and the Mother's Yoga is to make sure that the human consciousness does not refuse divine's grace. This is something people haven't understood. It is not the divine grace that we don't have. Divine grace we always have had. Whenever a saint has come, I don't know of what description, I don't care what of description, they have also always brought the highest light. But we have rejected it, we have refused, we don't want it, except ceremonially. Divine's grace I want is a small little lamp so that I can hang it outside on my door. So I want decoration. But nobody wants that light here. We want it outside. We want it, like centenary volume, Sri Aurobindo's beautiful. They can all be put in the drawing room, In the cupboard you have nice colored volumes. It's very impressive, instead of getting some, various things you put in a showcase. Sri Aurobindo's books are also very beautiful, put in a showcase. If that is the use you make of Sri Aurobindo's books, human beings are capable of that. So human beings are also capable of using the divine light, not for themselves, but as a kind of decoration for life. And this has gone on. If I were a god, I would have long ago forgotten mankind, because mankind has repeatedly failed God. And what Sri Aurobindo and the Mother want to make sure is that man does not refuse grace when it comes. Man can recognize grace as grace when it comes. What will give man that capacity? What will give man that capacity is a consciousness beyond the mind. A consciousness that doesn't pervert, that doesn't distort what comes from above. And therefore, he says, evil I must be, and by evil live. Not other can I do but be myself. What nature made me, that I must remain. I suffer and toil and weep. I mourn and hate. My juices, vital juices, don't flow freely until I begin to hate. That's what this man says. Begins with love. What happens to this love? Ends as hate. This is the contribution that human beings make to whatever comes from above. I am not at all surprised if somebody were to tell me, somebody who knows more about this, that the supramental right did come, but the man didn't care enough about it, so the asuras are now holding it in their hands. You must go and snatch it from them if you want it. It's quite possible. The mother said, when it came down, nobody in the ashram compound even knew it had come down. He said there are only 3 or 4 people in the whole universe who knew that something had come down. They didn't know what it was, it had come down. Nobody even in the ashram knew it had come down. So it's quite possible. But asuras, as I said, are very smart people. They must have got hold of it. And now the next battle is to take it out from their custody and use it for ourselves. So this is what always happens. So when he has finished saying this, Savitri says to both of these, Madonna of suffering, mother of grief divine, thou art a portion of my soul, put forth to bear the unbearable sorrow of the world. Because thou art, men yield not to their doom, but ask for happiness and strive with fate. Because thou art, the wretched still can hope, but thine is the power to solace, not to save. You haven't got the power to save, you only have the power to console, to solace. One day I will return, a bringer of strength, and make thee drink from the Eternal's cup. His streams of force shall triumph in thy limbs, and wisdom's calm control thy passionate heart. Thy love shall be the bond of humankind, compassion the bright key of nature's acts. Misery shall pass abolished from the earth. The world shall be freed from the anger of the beast, from the cruelty of the titan and his pain. There shall be peace and joy forevermore. Savitri recognizes that this Madonna has come down. She has been supporting mankind, but still something is missing. Something more has to come. So basically, as you see at the end of it, what we call tamas, what we call rajas, and what we call sattva are manifestations in the lower nature of something very superior which is in the higher nature. And so, unless the supermind comes, sattva, tamas and rajas cannot be converted. Even if you find God here, you still live in a body, you still live with a vital consciousness, which is subject to the play of these triple forces, sattva, rajas and guna. And there is nothing you can do about it. They do create various kinds of vibrations in you because their very nature is constant movement. But because of your experience of the divine, you can put control over them. That's about all. I don't think that a Rishi doesn't get angry. He does get angry. But because he has tasted the divine, he has a better control of himself. That's about all. So, as long as you have the divine, you come down and complain, my body has TB, my something has cancer. What kind of a divine are you? This is not acceptable. It may be acceptable according to certain concepts of God, but for Sri Aurobindo says this is not acceptable to me. If it is divine, he must be divine from top to bottom. He should have a divine body, he should have a divine vital, he should have a divine mind. That we have not yet got it is a different matter, but it is not beyond the conception of achievement. We want to achieve it. What is the point in saying my soul is divine? The soul was always divine. What is it that you have done special about it? We always say soul is the divine. So I have achieved the divinity of my soul, which is already implicit in it. Well, before we came down to earth, they were already there in the divine's court quite happily. Later on, we'll see that very beautiful passage. I don't know whether at this page that we are going, whether we will reach there or we have to conclude before that. When everything is done, Satyavan is also returned to Savitri. The god of death says to Savitri, look Savitri, before you go down to earth with all this enthusiasm, like, people coming to India and going to America with enthusiasm and say, I want to save my country, I want to go back to my country and so on, all this enthusiasm. Look, I want to give you a word of caution. You want to go back to earth and want to save mankind, help mankind. But two things you must bear in mind. One is, does really mankind really want to be helped and saved? Or you just want to save mankind? Mankind is quite happy as it is. All it wants is some minor adjustments. I only say in my street, if the garbage clearance were a little more regular and the power shortage was regularized, life would be much happy. So if God were to come and ask for these two things, nobody wants to be saved. That's one thing. And second, she says, on earth everything gets corrupted. So I am not sure, even the love between you and Satyavan, how long it will last uncorrupted, because the very breath of the earth is foul. So instead of going to the earth, I will create for you a special heaven, a special paradise, where there is no problem of garbage clearance, where there is no power shortage, where you won't get old, where none of the laws that apply to ordinary human beings will apply to you. You can walk hand in hand till eternity in a garden of paradise. The reply that Savitri gives to the god of death is very, very fascinating. He says, I am not a stranger to the heavens that you have described. We have all come from that heaven here. It's like going back to my Micah. What is so new about it? I have seen all this. But I have come here to make it possible for God to walk on earth. So Satyavan and I have this mission. And so, what is this God that we have created? What is this God we are after? Where your body is far away from divine perfection, your mind is far away from divine perfection. Does that mean to say that all that we have accumulated with a great deal of effort down the ages, all our science and technology and everything has to be dumped into the waste paper basket, and we just take our soul and go back to God? God will ask us, what have you brought, my son? Sorry sir, I didn't bring anything, I just brought my soul. This is what I gave you. Soul is what I gave you. What did you bring back? No, I found it very difficult. So what happened? In the first 10 miles post I shed my body. Then I started running. Then I found at the 20 miles post I found the vital is a burden. I shed that. At 30 miles I shed my mind. What have you brought? Nothing. Because everything was heavy. Then why did I send you down to earth? So I have the whole thing that I would like to emphasize, and the whole emphasis of Sri Aurobindo is, this is not acceptable to say that our idea of perfection is primarily a perfection of our inner soul. No doubt this is a very great achievement. One who has freed his soul, if he appears before me, I will be the first man to bend down and touch his soul, touch his feet. I don't care who he is. Every person who has achieved perfection of the soul, for me, is worthy of my highest reverence. But that is not our goal. Our goal is, as Sri Aurobindo therefore says, people get infuriated. Then Sri Aurobindo says, where all other yogas end, my yoga begins. What does he mean by that? He doesn't mean to say that I am very special. All that he says is, my yoga, purpose of my yoga is to bring perfection to the body, perfection to the vital, and perfection to the mind. And these are possible only if the soul is perfect. It doesn't mean, you can ignore the Gita, you can ignore all spiritual disciplines and suddenly you become supramental. That is, very often Sri Aurobindo's disciples talk about Superman is around the corner, available in the supermarket. It's not that easy. The traditional yogas are important. That path of discipline has to be walked. All that Sri Aurobindo wants to emphasize in the context of the Indian yogas, this ideal you have defined for myself, for me, does not represent a significant goal in life. There is a passage I've been telling Vijayan Bhai, one of these days I will read. It's a beautiful passage where we talk about man has been sent here on this journey with a body and the other equipments, mind and life energy and so on. And we all think, God has given us this equipment so that we can make money. At the end of the day, what matters? At the end of the day, what matters is what have you done with whatever you have. If you haven't made a lot of money, then you have wasted your time either, or you're incapable. Your grandmother or my grandmother stories. The grandson became a professor, and after becoming a professor, he started reading more because he had to teach. He said, "What is this, my grandson? Everybody finishes studies and then they, stop reading books. Now you are studying more than ever before. What is the point of reading all these things?" Or take for example, when I moved to our house in Hyderabad, all our neighbors in my built complex of flats are businessmen. So they all came, courtesy call. When my wife was around, my wife showed, this is what it is. They saw my study and immediately concluded that we must be booksellers. Why otherwise should a man who is qualified, who is educated, why should he have books? The purpose of books must be, this is what it is. It's a beautiful passage where Sri Aurobindo talks about this. This is how we judge and evaluate a man. And he also says this experience is very necessary for every individual. No individual can turn to God just like that. You have turned to God today because you have gone through those experiences, that search of that fulfillment in previous lives. Therefore, don't look down upon people who aren't doing this yet. They will also come. Okay, later on he says, this will be left here, I will be talking about other things. At one point he says, there is a choice for a soul. The choice is either, later on he says, one day you will realize that this ship has been given to you, this body, everything has been given to you, so that you sail across the sea in search of another land, another shore. But whether you are going to reach a blank port of nirvana or a port where you get a new body and a new mind is something your soul already has decided. So he is willing to admit that the so-called perfection of the soul, this nirvana and so on, may be the highest ideal for some people. Sri Aurobindo never said that the way I have defined the goal of my yoga is good for everybody. He is simply saying, do not try to thrust it down my throat, saying nirvana is the highest ideal, there is nothing beyond it, because I have seen there is an ideal behind it. And to those who find this ideal attractive, I am only calling those people. For others who do not find any meaning in acquiring a new body, a new mind and a new vital, all right, you have your nirvana, you have your moksha, fine. But I can't accept anything short of integral divinization. He wants integral Brahman. He wants us to be integrally God. And not just God from within, but human or animal from outside, subject to the same passions. Now, as I said, in our human nature, we have the play of what is called, the Gita talks about, the lower prakriti is at the mercy of sattva, rajas and tamas. And as long as you are in the lower prakriti, no matter how many times you have seen God, your nature will not rise above the play of these gunas. And as long as you are subject to the play of the gunas, you are far away from divinization. What has to happen then? Sattva has to be transformed into its equivalent. Sattva when transformed becomes Jyoti. Rajas when it is transformed becomes Teja. And tamas when it is transformed becomes Shanti. Now since these are not the triple forces of the lower nature, there is no question of these three clashing all the time. In the higher nature, therefore, there is no depression, there is no lack of balance. As long as you are in the lower nature, As long as you are in the hands of the triple prakriti, the triple nature of the lower prakriti, this is bound to be there. And all these forces have come. The force that will put them into the right relationship is the supramental power. That's why Savitri towards the end says, each one of you is definitely a representative of the divine, but you are not in a position to do the job for which you have come down, because you need a still greater power than the human mind, and that is the supramental power. I will go and bring it, she says. Savitri says, I will go and bring this power, and then you will find each one of you will be at your highest, and you will be very happy performing the kinds of things you are doing, and the perversion that has now taken place will just disappear. Now this is the central idea of this. So after we have talked about this first Madonna, Madonna of compassion, there is another Madonna, there is another power which has already come down here on earth, which has been I am thy secret soul. I have come down into the human world, and the movement watched by an unsleeping eye, and the dark contrariety of earth's fate, and the battle of the bright and somber powers. I stand upon earth's paths of danger and grief, and help the unfortunate and save the doomed. To the strong I bring the guerdon of their strength, to the weak I bring the armor of my force. To men who long I carry their coveted joy. I am fortune justifying the great and wise by the sanction of the plaudits of the crowd, then trampling them with the armed heel of fate. My ear is lean to the cry of the oppressed. I topple down the thrones of tyrant kings. A cry comes from proscribed and hunted lives, appealing to me against a pitiless world, a voice of the forsaken and desolate, and the lone prisoner in his dungeon cell. Men hail in my coming the Almighty's force, or praise with thankful tears His Saviour grace. And go on, she says, I am Durga, goddess of the proud and strong, and Lakshmi, queen of the fair and fortunate. I wear the face of Kali when I kill. I trample the corpses of the demon hordes. I am charged by God to do His mighty work. Uncaring I serve His will who sent me forth, reckless of peril and earthly consequence. I reason not of virtue and of sin, but to the deed He has put into my heart. I fear not for the angry frown of heaven. I flinch not from the red assault of hell. I crush the opposition of the gods, tread down 1,000,000 goblin obstacles. I guide man to the path of the divine, and guard him from the red wolf and the snake. I set in his mortal hand my heavenly sword, and put on him the breastplate of the gods. Goes on saying, I have come here, and therefore in human affairs I am the guardian of the world's felicity, and I protect human beings, I protect the world, I protect the earth. I sometimes come as Kali, sometimes I come as Durga, sometimes I come as Lakshmi. But even this force, which basically represents the Rajasic force in this earth, that also has become perverted. And this perversion you find very often in the egoistic scientist who says, I have banished God, I don't need any God, I am the God. And it's a beautiful passage. This is the egoistic scientist who represents the great Rajasic power today in this world. He says this, I am the heir of the forces of the earth. This is the asuric perversion of Durga, Kali and so on. He says, I am the heir of the forces of the earth. Slowly I make good my right to my estate, a growing godhead in her divinized mud. I climb, a claimant to the throne of heaven. The last born of the earth, I stand the first. He is her slow millenniums waited for my birth. Although I live in time besieged by death, etc. We skip a few lines and then come to page 512. He says, why did God create this world? He created it for me. And he says, air was invented for my lungs to breathe. Page 512, second line. Air was invented for my lungs to breathe, conditioned as a wide and wall-less space for my winged chariot's wheel to cleave a road. Why was the sea made? The sea was made for me to swim and sail. Sea was made so that I can swim and sail and bear my golden commerce on its back. It laughs cloven by my pleasure's gliding keel. I laugh at its black state of fate and death. The earth is my floor, the sky my living's roof. All was prepared through many a silent age. God made experiments with animal shapes. Then only when all was ready, I was born. See, when God experimented with various animals, and finally when I was born, in fact there is a statement to this effect in the Upanishad. God created all the animals and so on. When man was created, he said, this is more or less what I want. This is where God says, and this man says, when I was created, God was happy and clapped his hands. I was born weak and small and ignorant, a helpless creature in a difficult world, traveling through my brief years with death at my side. I have grown greater than nature, wiser than God. The scientist says, I have grown wiser than God. I have made real what she never dreamed. What nature never dreamed, I have made real. I have seized her powers and harnessed for my work. I have shaped her metals and new metals made. I have created metals. Nature had no idea could be created. I have made those metals. I will make glass and raiment out of milk. You know, my next project is to make glass out of milk. And the next generation, you wear silk, wool, cotton, various kinds of fabrics. My plan is to make clothes out of milk, glass out of milk. That is what I am planning, he says. I will make glass and raiment out of milk, make iron velvet. I will make iron soft like velvet, make iron velvet, water, unbreakable stone. So my project is the next generation will build houses of waters. But water will be unbreakable stone. Like God in his astutes of artist skills, mold from one primal plasm protean forms, in single nature multitudinous lives, all that imagination can conceive, in mind intangible remold anew, in matters plastic, solid and concrete, no magic can surpass my magic's skill. There is no miracle I shall not achieve. What God imperfect left, I will complete. In many places in the world where God didn't know how to complete this project, I will complete that project. What God imperfect left, I will complete. Out of a tangled mind and half-made soul, his sin and error I will eliminate. God made many errors in making this world. He has also made many sins. I will eliminate all these errors of God. What he invented not, I shall invent He was the first creator. I am the last. God may have been the first creator. I am the last. And he goes on. And I just want to give you a flavor of this. We can't spend too much time on this. Again, Savitri says, Madonna of might, mother of works and force, thou art a portion of my soul put forth, to help mankind and help the travail of time. Because thou art in him, man hopes and dares. Because thou art, men's soul can climb the heavens and walk like gods in the presence of the Supreme. But without wisdom, power is like a wind. It can breathe upon the heights and kiss the sky. It cannot build the extreme, eternal things. Thou hast given men strength, wisdom thou couldst not give. One day I will return, a bringer of light. Then I will give to thee the mirror of God. Thou shalt see self and world as by him they are seen. Now you are seeing the world as seen by your ego. I will give you a mirror where you will see the world as God sees it, not as your ego sees it. Now we see the world as our ego sees it. Thou shalt see self and world as by him they are seen, reflected in the bright pool of thy soul. Thy wisdom shall be vast, as vast thy power. Then hate shall dwell no more in human hearts, and fear and weakness shall desert men's lives. The cry of the ego shall be hushed within, its lion roar that claims the world as food. This is the whole problem of the Rajasic ego. It wants to gobble the whole world. Whatever you give, it just wants to gobble it. Its lion roar that claims the world as food. All shall be might and bliss and happy force. I shall go. The mother says, Savitri says to this Madonna also, as she said to the earlier Madonna, that one more power has yet to come down. And once that power comes, you will all be able to work to your perfection. But now, there is so much distortion, so much perversion in this world that your power cannot reach people who should be helped. Finally, there is this other mother, the Madonna of light. And she says this on page 515. I won't read too much, just a little bit. O Savitri, I am thy secret soul. Each Madonna comes and says, I am the secret soul. You don't have to go anywhere beyond. I have come down to the wounded, desolate earth to heal her pangs and lull her heart to rest, and lay her head upon the mother's lap, that she may dream of God and know his peace, and draw the harmony of higher spheres into the rhythm of earth's rude, troubled days. This is the Madonna who has brought to this earth various saintly nature, people with saintly natures, various people who have turned towards God, who are basically sattvic in nature. This is the Madonna of sattva, this is the sattvic nature. Well, as I said, I won't spend much time, just point out to you what it is. Now, this Madonna also has an egoistic echo. And that you find in line 5, in page 518. And this Madonna, ego, the perversion, says, I am the mind of God's great ignorant world. Ascending to knowledge by the steps he made, I am the all-discovering thought of man. I am a God fettered by matter and sense, an animal prisoned in a fence of thorns, a beast of labor asking for his food, a smith tied to his anvil and his forge. Yet have I loosened the cord, enlarged my robe. What have I done? I have mapped the heavens and analyzed the stars. described their orbits through the grooves of space, measured the miles that separate the suns. You ask me, what is the distance between the sun and the moon? I know it precisely to centimeters. How many, billions of miles or kilometers and centimeters I have measured all this. Described their orbits through the grooves of space, measured the miles that separates the suns, computed their longevity in time. You ask me, I'll tell you when the moon is going to disintegrate, when the sun is going to disintegrate, when all these things are going to come to a close. I have delved into earth's bowels and torn out the riches guarded by her dull brown soil. I have been with the archaeologist. I have dug into this earth. I have clasped the changes of her stony crust and of her biography, discovered the dates. I know when the first ice age came, when the second ice age came, when the next ice age is going to come, what are the various things that happen to the earth. All this I have studied. And of her biography discovered the dates, rescued the pages of all nature's plan. The tree of evolution I have sketched. I know first what forms of life came, then what forms of life developed out of it, at what time, how many millenniums, centuries, with everything I know. Each branch and twig and leaf in its own place. In the embryo tracked the history of forms, and the genealogy framed of all that lives. I have detected plasm and cell and gene. The protozoa traced man's ancestors, the humble originals from whom he rose. I know how he was born and how he dies. I know exactly how a human being is born. I know exactly how a human being dies. But only what end he serves, I know not yet. I know exactly how human beings are born. I know how he dies, but I don't know why he lives. Why should we live? What is the significance of our life? What are we supposed to do? Don't ask me. Modern philosophy, if you go to Oxford and ask them this question, can you help me about basic issues like love and God? He says these are not questions we can even answer. That is not within philosophy. Philosophy basically talks about whether a statement you have made is logical or not logical. That's all that I can talk about. God, I don't know whether you can even ask a question about God, but if you say, how can I live without knowing answer to questions about God and love, it's too bad. Don't come to me, you must go to some quack. They will answer these questions. Don't ask me, philosophy has no answers to this question. Schumacher, the great economist, was advisor to the British Coal Board, not a mystic by any chance. Very, very practical man. He wrote a very interesting book. What's it called? A Philosophy for the Perplexed. That's the name of that book. He says if we do any book on philosophy, they will not answer any of the questions in which you and I are interested. They say they are not in our vocabulary. We are not even competent to deal with these questions. Is there God? Is there a purpose to life? What is the place of love? Don't ask any of these questions. All that we can say is whether a statement you make is logical or not logical, whether it has a truth value or no truth value. This is all that we can judge. Sorry sir, I am not interested in these things. I am interested in these other questions. Bad luck, we have no answer to this question. So he says, I have therefore, he writes in the introduction, therefore I have taken courage in both hands, and I am going to write about issues that concern you and me. These issues unfortunately don't concern philosophy anymore. This is what this man also says. I know exactly how human beings are born. I know exactly how they die, but I don't know why we are here. What is it we are supposed to achieve? What is it we are supposed to do in this world? What is a significant life? I don't know any of these things. I know how he was born and how he dies. Only what end he serves, I know not yet. Or, if there is aim at all, or any end. I am not very sure that human life has any aim, that human life has any significance, that human life has any end. They say in 1968 there was a student revolution in Paris. Reverberated throughout the world. And one of the graffiti, the slogans that they wrote to one of the underground stations says, "There is no truth." You don't have to waste time finding out the truth because there is no truth. And everything is permissible. You can do what you like, there is no truth. This is the utter desperation to which the world has gone, because they are not able to answer this very basic question. If there is a aim at all or any end to human life, we know how human beings are born, how they die. But don't ask me, why should I live? What is important in my life? Don't ask. These questions cannot be answered. So, again, it's a long thing. It talks about a number of things. Again, as you said, Madonna of light, Savitri says to this Madonna also, mother of joy and peace. Thou art, page 520, thou art a portion of myself put forth to raise the spirit to its forgotten heights and wake the soul by touches of the heavens. Because thou art, the soul draws near to God. Because thou art, love grows in spite of hate, and knowledge walks unslain in the pit of night, but not by showering heaven's golden rain upon the intellect's hard and rocky soil can the tree of paradise flower on earthly ground. And the bird of paradise sit upon life's boughs, and the winds of paradise visit mortal air. Even if thou rain down intuition's rays, the mind of man will think it earth's own gleam, his spirit by spiritual ego sink. These are all various grades of egos. You have, first of all, the tamasic ego, the rajasic ego, and the worst of the egos is the spiritual ego. And this asura is the sattvic ego, and sattvic ego is the most difficult ego. And therefore he says, or his soul dream shut in sainthood's brilliant cell. If you are a saint, then you are a very, very difficult candidate. Because you are already a saint. Who can talk to you? Who can guide you? So it's better not to be a saint. It's better to be a human being walking towards God and not be shut up in your sainthood. Sainthood is some kind of a mental ideal. It's a great sattvic ideal, but they are not capable of going beyond it. And many, many of these moral idealists have rejected Sri Aurobindo simply because they were afraid of going beyond the mind. Sattva, the highest moral ideal, is still the mental ideal. And spirituality demands that we go beyond the mind. And that is something which most people find very, very difficult to believe. And many of the popular saints who have gone round the world are basically talking about a sattvic ideal, but still there are various kinds of egos, and a man who gives a reason to be confined by your intellectual ego is regarded as a god. You don't need a guru, you don't need a scripture, you don't need a teacher, you just let your mind be what it is, enjoy the beauty of nature, enjoy the singing of the birds, you will have everything. This is the kind of cult that people, modern intellectuals, finds very appealing, because in spirituality it says the first thing you have to do is kneel down, offer your ego to God. We are unwilling to do it. And therefore it is possible to find an excuse for not surrendering your ego. And this, I'm sure I don't want to name names, but 20th century finds this kind of approach very appealing. There is no God, there is no guru, there is no scripture. You don't have to bow down to anybody. You don't have to surrender to anybody. These things have no meaning. You just be yourself and find peace, relief. I don't know whether it can ever come, but as I said, This is something very appealing, but here you have, he says, his soul dream shut in sainthood's brilliant cell, where only a bright shadow of God can come. In this brilliant cell of sainthood, God can never come. All that can come is God's shadow. His hunger for the eternal thou must nurse, and fill his yearning heart with heaven's fire, and bring God down into his body and life. One day, as he says to other Madonnas, he says, one day I will return, his hand in mine, and thou shalt see the face of the Absolute. Then shall the holy marriage be achieved. Then shall be the divine family be born. There shall be light and peace in all the worlds. In the three mothers you have the instruments of the supramental Shakti. The sattva has to become, as I said, Jyoti. Rajas has to become tapas, as Sri Aurobindo talks about it, which means tranquilly intensive divine power. This is how he describes Rajas. And tamas has to become what he calls shama, which is the divine's quiet, divine's rest, and divine's peace. Now, this transformation can only take place with the help of the supramental force. Unless the supramental force can bring about this transformation, man's nature forever will remain imprisoned in sattva, tamas and rajas. And everybody has said, nobody can live in tamas alone. Nobody can live in rajas alone. Nobody can live in sattva alone. There's always a constant play of these. Once this dominates, then the other thing dominates. Disequilibrium is its very nature. And as long as human nature is subject to the place of the three gunas, there is no peace for man. There is no happiness for man. But for this transformation, what is needed is a power greater than the mind. Savitri is now, she says, I am looking for this power. I'll bring this power down, and then each of the three Madonnas, she says, you will realize your highest goal. This is these triple soul forces. I just wanted to read you this. The more important, crucial cantos are Canto 5, the finding of the soul. It's a tremendous canto which also describes the awakening of the Kundalini. In Sri Aurobindo's yoga, there is no rise of the ascent of the Kundalini, there is the descent of the Kundalini power. And everything that, as I told you, Sri Aurobindo's yoga primarily combines the Vedantic yoga with the Tantric yoga. And that is why in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, although the starting point, like Vedanta, is consciousness, the mentalized consciousness, the guru of this yoga, the goddess of this yoga is the mother. Mother Shakti is also the goddess of Tantra. And Sri Aurobindo is the only saint Rishi in modern India who has not dismissed Tantra. Many people have dismissed Tantra because Tantra lends itself to a great deal of misuse. In India it has happened, and so it has fallen into discredit. But Sri Aurobindo brings them together. But as I said, just as he doesn't retain any of the elaborate machinery of traditional Vedanta, he also does not use any of the machinery of Tantra. But he takes the quintessential truth of both these and combines these together. And here also there is a descent. There is a descent of the higher force. Sri Aurobindo talks about the static divine and the dynamic divine. He talks about these two divine descents. When the static divine comes, you have what is called peace. You have intense stolidity in yourself. Then sometimes the descent is dynamic. When the dynamic descent comes, you have force coursing through your body. And this Kundalini is also described. But before that, something else is also described here, which is the for this reason I didn't want to get into this. The merging of the psychic being with the Jivatman. Sri Aurobindo makes a distinction between the Jivatman, or what is called the self, and what is called the soul. But these, as I said, this will require at least a whole session to make exactly the distinction that Sri Aurobindo makes. And I am of this opinion that Sri Aurobindo and the Mother together have added a new dimension to spiritual life, spiritual search. The notion of psychic being was there in the more ancient spiritual literature. Very often it is to be called Chaitya Purusha and so on, but its significance was not fully developed. And Sri Aurobindo develops this significance, and Sri Aurobindo has acknowledged that the major contribution to this comes from the Mother. She in her yoga gives a great deal of importance to the psychic being. And if you have been able to reach the psychic being in your person, then unlike other yogas, your yoga is a triumphal march from one station of success to another. Because the psychic being, by its very nature, loves the divine. See, unless you have something within you which loves the divine, you have all the time to keep you goading yourself. Go to the divine, go to the divine. But if you love the divine, nobody needs to goad you, because you love it. What is it in you that loves the divine? The psychic being loves the divine. Why is the psychic being why is it that the psychic being divine? The psychic being in its very nature is like the sunflower. Its natural tendency is to turn its face, full face towards the sun, full face towards the divine. And so, Mother used to say to the ashram boys and girls, I don't care what else you do in life, but try to do one thing, realize you are psychic being. Once you have done that, you don't have to worry about the end of your goal of your spiritual life. There is guaranteed success in it. So, this psychic being, what is the psychic being? How is it different from soul? How is it different from spirit? What actually happens? What is it that is traveling from one life to another life? What is the psychic? What is the psychic being? What stage the psychic being comes? These are all matters of great importance in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, and they are also important in understanding Savitri's yoga. But as I said, these are matters which require great elaboration. And so I won't talk about this, but I just want to point out to you that in this particular canto, where you have the finding of the soul, you have a great description of this, and along with it you have, particularly page 526 to 527 is a description of the psychic and the Jivatman merging with each other. Psychic is an emanation, as a representative of the Jivatman, which has come down into matter, and it gradually realizes itself. That is a wonderful part of this description. Unfortunately, we can't do it. Page 526 to 527. And if you want to see a description of the rising of the Kundalini, this has never been done in English poetry so far. And Sri Aurobindo describes it in two different places. And this is one place where it has been described. So, since I always read some lines from Savitri in every session, this may be a good passage to read. It begins on 529. When Savitri's psychic being merged with what is called the Jivatman, there is a great transformation that comes over Savitri. And one of these is the descent of the divine in Savitri. As a result of this, page 529, all underwent a high celestial change, breaking the black inconscience, blind, mute wall, effacing the circles of the ignorance. Powers and divinities burst flaming forth. Powers and divinities, he says. Powers and divinities burst flaming forth, each part of the being trembling with delight, lay overwhelmed with tides of happiness. Even to read this, you You feel, each part of the being trembling with delight, lay overwhelmed with tides of happiness, and saw her hand in every circumstance, and felt her touch in every limb and cell. He feels the divine, the higher Prakriti, the divine descending into Savitri's being. In the country of the lotus of the head, where they locate the Sahasrara with 1,000 petals, there is this country of the lotus of the head, which thinking mind has made its busy space. In the castle of the lotus twixt the brows, there where you have what is called the Agya Chakra. It's here, first here and then here. In the castle of the lotus twixt the brows, whence it shoots the arrows of its sight and will. In the passage of the lotus of the throat, which is called the Vishuddha, which is supposed to be a lotus with 16 petals, Vishuddha, that opens up, where speech must rise, and the expressing mind and the heart's impulse run towards word and act. A glad uplift and a new working came. The immortal's thoughts displaced our bounded view. The immortal's thoughts earth's drab idea and sense. All things now bore a deeper, heavenlier sense. A glad, clear harmony marked their truth's outline. Reset the balance and measures of the world. Each shape showed its occult design, unveiled God's meaning in it for which it was made, and the vivid splendor of his artist's thought, a channel of the mighty mother's choice. The immortal's will took into its calm control our blind or erring government of life, a loose republic once of wants and needs, then bowed to the uncertain sovereign mind. Life now obeyed to a diviner rule, and every act became an act of God. Then, in the kingdom of the lotus of the heart, where you have what is called the Anahata Chakra, with 12 petals, love chanting its pure hymeneal hymn. If the Shakti touches your heart, then the flower, the lotus of the heart blossoms. And when the lotus of the heart blossoms, you'll be surprised at the kind of love that descends into it. Love chanting its pure hymeneal hymn made life and body mirrors of sacred joy, and all the emotions gave themselves to God. Then, from here, in the navel lotus broad imperial range, it's called the Manipura Chakra, its proud ambitions and its master lusts were tamed into instruments of a great calm sway to do a work of God on earthly soil. Then comes the Swadhisthana Chakra. In the narrow nether center's petty parts, its childish game of daily dwarf desires was changed into a sweet and boisterous play, a romp of little gods with life in time. And then the bottommost chakra, which is called the Muladhara. In the deep place where once the serpent slept, this is where the Kundalini, the serpent, is sleeping. In the deep place where once the serpent slept, there came a grip on matter's giant powers. For large utilities in life's little space, a firm ground was made for heaven's descending might. Well, it's all very interesting, but we have to drive long distances, go home, so I think I'll bring this to a conclusion by reading the end of this particular thing on page 531. This is the feeling that Savitri has once all this taken place. What is the feeling? O soul, my soul, we have created heaven. She feels heaven has descended. O soul, my soul, we have created heaven. Within we have found the kingdom here of God. His fortress built in a loud, ignorant world. Our life is entrenched between two rivers of light. We have turned space into a gulf of peace and made the body a capital of bliss. What more? What more? If more must still be done. This is the feeling that Savitri has when she has this realization. As you can simply see, I am blowing, calling your attention to these things. It's a wonderful world. Many, 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 many dimensions. Well, we'll take up, we have 3 more sessions left and we have quite a bit to cover. We'll do our best tomorrow, Saturday.